the reason why I decided to schedule the class for tonight. Last week we talked about accounting for labor. So before we even start anything, for those who are in the class on Sunday, so I want someone to just unmute this or our mic and then tell us what we did in the last class, so that we will know that what we have been doing in the class, we are all on the same page. So someone should unmute his or her mic, or I should just cut someone myself. So within 1 minute or 30 seconds. So someone should just unmute and explain little things of what we did on Sunday. Who is going to talk? Okay, it seems like I'm going to pick someone. Okay. Mr. Jeremiah, can you unmute and just tell us about what we did in the last class?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Jeremiah, please hold on for Mrs. Okoro to talk. Please, Mrs. Okoro, you can go on.
Okay, sir. So last week we talked about accounting for labor, and then we talked about the two main labor remuneration methods, which are time rate system and PS rate system. And then you went ahead to tell us about the advantages of each of them. And then there was this equation that we solved. There was this question that we solved. I don't know if I can get my paper and read them.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. So please hold on. Okay, so the question is like this. There are 6 workers in a production department of a manufacturing company. Ayo, Bola, Mezanet, Dapo, Niola, and Alasa. The following informations are extracted from the company's record for the month. Standard production per month, 1,250 units.
Okay.
Production by employers are as follows.
Okay.
So you went ahead to tell us that for we to answer this question in ICAN, or we should do a full solving. First of all, okay, the solution, computation of total workers' remuneration. The first thing you're supposed to do is to write out the names of those workers.
Okay.
Then the second one is the standard production, which is fees, 1,250 naira.
Okay. Now let me take it from there. It shows that
sir.
You really understand what we did. You know, the purpose of the last class is, like you mentioned, is just all about how to account for labor, which we know labor is one of the key pillars in every organizations to help them to carry out their productions activities to achieve their goals. And then we were able to talk about the different approach on how to calculate labor remunerations. So like you make mention, we talked about time rate system, and then we talk about the piece rate system. And then which we are able to solve equations relating to one of the remuneration method. You know, like I make mention in the last class, there is one thing to see questions, and then there is another thing to understand what the question is actually all about. And one thing that can actually make us have a well successful uh, achievement in passing this course is to make sure that we understand the basics. You know, what is the topic all about, and then how can we actually deal with the topic whenever it comes in the exam hall. And I also mention that whenever you see questions, even though it's the question that you understand very well. You know, ICANN can be so funny. You need to know what exactly did they ask you to do. Now, one thing in management accounting is every organization usually sets their standard. And then at the end of the period or at the end of the activities level, they will now make a comparison within their standard and what's actual productions or actual service they rendered. That we help them to know where to make a proper decisions from. Now, from the last class, you know, whenever you see something like this, and you have already understand what they ask you to do. Now, they will give you what they plan to achieve. And then the secondly is they will also give you what they achieve at the end of the period. Now it's now left to you as a management accountant, because whenever you are writing the exam, you are a management accountant on your own that are attending to a particular problems that was given to you by an organization. So in that kind of scenario, just make sure that you understand what it's all about. So that is where I will stop. And Mr. Jeremiah, maybe before we end the class, then I will also give you the permission to say one or two things. And today's class is going to be on accounting for overhead. So I don't want to spend more than an hour, and I want to see the way I will try to structure that, because we have like 3 exercises to solve so that we can get what accounting for overhead is all about. Now, you know, it is very easy for every organization to allocate costs for their inventory, you know, to calculate their inventories whenever they want to buy or whenever they want to make the productions. And then same goes to labor. Like I mentioned in the last class that, you know, an organization might decide to charge a labor based on the level of the productions that they are producing, or they charge them based on the number of hours they are going to spend in producing that productions. But when it comes to overhead, you know, overhead can be so funny to the extent that it will be difficult for an organization to know the approach on how to split it within the level of our activities. And then one thing that is very certain is, okay, let me bring a very small scenario now. You own a store, and then in this store, you rent that particular store for 300,000 per year. And then you fill the store with a carton of maybe Coke or Pepsi. You have already calculated the cost of bringing that production into your store. Then you also calculated for the labor that help you to bring those stores, or the workers within that particular store. Now, some of organizations fail to calculate or don't know the way to split the overhead to that level of the productions. So in this kind of scenario, every organization now have different approach and then different method on how to split their overhead to the level of our productions. Now the question now comes, what is an overhead? As you can see it on the screen, let me zoom it a little. Okay. Now, an overhead simply refers to the cost that cannot be directly traced to the specific products or service. Now, like the example that I'm giving now, the store is where you keep your productions. The rent that you paid to keep those productions are not directly related to that product or the services. But you still need to know how to split that cost of that store that you keep those products. You still need to split them over those productions in order for you to ascertain the cost of selling those each of those production out for you to make a profit on them. And then all these causes help an organization to determine what is going to be their selling price at the end of the period, when they come up with the breakdown on what they spend in each of the productions. So now we have direct expenses, like I explained when I was discussing on the classification of costs. Anywhere you see direct expenses, you should know that these are the costs that are specifically directly to a specific level of productions or cost centers. They are related fully to that productions that to that product that you are producing, or to that service that you are rendered. Your direct materials, direct labor, direct overhead, they are the one that form the prime cost, the cost of you producing that product. Why indirect cost is majorly the one we refer to as overhead. They are very important, that we need to absorb them in the level of our productions. We have different type, or we have two types of indirect, three classification of indirect method. Production overhead, those ones that are related to the production, maybe the factory or the electricity, others like that. And then where we also have the administration costs, those non-productions departments, but they also play significant role in carry out the activities of the production department. So now, treatments of fixed production overhead. We have two treatments, but in this accounting for overhead, we are going to focus more on the absorption overhead, absorption costing. When it comes to marginal costing, we are seeing maybe our next topic is what we are going to be discussing. Marginal costing focused on the costs that are attributable to the productions in order to determine the contributions that each of the units of the productions is bringing. But why absorption costing is, we usually call it a traditional approach, where we need to consider all the costs that we use in making that productions, whether direct or indirect. We consider all those costs. So that is why in this particular class today, in today's class, we are going to focus more on how an organization can absorb a cost into the various level of activities. Now, fixed overhead are absorbed. When we talk about absorb, what do we mean? Allocate. We allocate it to the productions. We allocate it along with those costs that are directly involved in producing that product. Like example, now you purchase your material 5 naira and then you pay for labor 2 naira. Now, the cost of electricity to carry out those productions are what we know as indirect cost or indirect expenses or indirect overhead. Now, whenever we are using an absorption costing, an absorption costing approach said we need to recognize all those costs whenever we are determining our price or whenever we are determining our costs. I hope we are on the same page with this explanation. And in the system of absorption costing, each item of absorption costing is charged maybe to a cost center or a general expenses. Now, for those that have been following the class from day one, when you hear cost center, you should be able to understand what cost center is. We say cost center are just those centers that are only responsible for the costs in carry out their level of activities. An organization can have different cost centers, and then they can decide to fix a particular cost that it will be spent in each of these cost centers. For example, now, an organization have like 2 or 3 cost centers, and then at the head office, they decided to budget like 30,000 for the cost of the electricity, which will be used within those 3 cost centers. Now, how are they going to absorb these costs into those 3 centers? An organization will now be the one to now come up with the approach. Maybe they want to absorb those costs in according to the level of the productions of each cost center, or they want to absorb the costs based on the total hour in producing the total productions in that particular cost centers. So every organization will be the one to come up with the approach that they want to use in allocating costs. Now, 2 main targets in absorption costing, allocation and then apportionment. We say allocation when a cost can be directly linked to a specific cost center. The entire cost is charged to that particular cost center. Now, for example, now you own two cost center. Maybe the first one is a processing unit cost center, while the second one is the finish cost center. And then the supervisor for those two cost centers. Now, you decided to allocate the cost. You decided to allocate costs to those cost center, based on the supervisor that are allocated to that particular cost center. In this kind of scenario, that salary has already been linked or been specific to a particular center, or it has already been linked to a particular purpose on what you want to use it for. So it is easy to trace in that kind of situations. The supervisor that is going to be monitoring the first centers and then the second centers, you decided you budgeted 30,000 naira for those two supervisors. And then you decided to split it into two, for the purpose of transparency. Or you can decide to distribute it based on how long it's going to take each of the cost center to produce their productions. That particular cost has already been linked for a particular purpose. Now, apportionment now is when a cost is being shared by two or more cost centers, where it will be divided between them based on their fair basis. What they mean by fair basis is, like I make mention, using the scenario of the electricities, or using a scenario of the total number of workers that are within those cost centers. You plan to spend a particular certain amount of money for them to carry out those level of productions. And then as a management accountant, you now decided, okay, to be on a fair basis, which basis of apportionment are you going to use in splitting those overhead costs in order not to overcharge the production costs per unit, and then in order for you to make sure that whenever the cost you are charging is within what an organization has already been budgeted for. I've made mention of these basic apportionment. So now let me let's do one scenario so that we be able to understand what this absorption costing is all about. So I want to see if I'll be able to use this particular instead of moving it to Excel this time around. But let me see how it's going to be. So now example 1. X PLC produced desk. Now that is their products. Each desk use 3 kg of wood. It means to produce these desks, they are going to buy 3 kg of wood at the cost of 4 naira per kg. All these ones we have discussed. I think we discussed it when we are discussing about the inventory, but I'm still going to discuss more better so that we can understand how each of the costs can be determined when you see something like this in the exam. Now, each desk uses 3 kg of wood. at the cost of 4 naira per kg. Now, this company wants to produce decks, and then they have already carried out their preliminary studies where they were able to come up with, okay, for us to produce these decks, we need to, the material that we need is going to be 3 kg of wood. Why each kg of this wood costs 4 naira per kg. And it takes 4 hours to produce this desk. Now, to produce each of these decks now, they need to, it's going to take them 4 hours. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. It means to produce 1 unit of desk, it will take them a maximum of 4 hours to produce one. And then now the labor involved is paid at the rate of 2 naira per hour. So it means for every 2 hours that each labor works now, the organization have already planned to give them 2 naira per hour. So it's going to take 4 hours to produce one desk, and then the labor is going to be paid 2 naira per hour. For every hour, they will be paid 2 naira. Now, the organization now move forward by having a fixed cost of production that estimated to 700,000 per annum. It means the fixed cost of productions, it has already been estimated to be 700,000. Now, how are we going to allocate or absorb these 700,000 to each of these decks productions? That is what we want to calculate here now. The company expects to produce 500 units of desk. Now, the company now come up with another scenario that, okay, we plan that every year we are going to produce 50,000 desks. Now, the requirement now asks us to calculate for the cost per desk. And for us to calculate for the cost per unit of production, you need to involve the inventory, you need to involve the labor, and then you need to involve the overhead. That is according to the absorption costing method or traditional method. So in this example now, we want to know how much is it going to cost us to produce each unit of desk. So we need to pay attention to this. Now, let me see if here will be easy for us to do. If it's noise, I'll just move it to our usual place. So now, solution. The first thing that will come to your mind, whenever you want to determine a cost for any productions, it usually involves 3 things: the material that involved, the labor that involved, and then the overhead costs that involve for you to carry out those productions or those level of activities are going to be the 3 major things that you are going to consider whenever you want to determine the cost per unit of productions in using the absorption costing method. Now, materials. So, okay, let me do it this way. Just give me a few minutes. Let me do it this way. Where is table? Let me do it this way. Okay. Now let me See if here will be okay. Now, description. I will just put our OPs here. Then total costs per unit in Naira. Okay. Okay, let me try to move this one down. Okay, now I hope you can see the question very well. Now, material, that is the number one thing that we need to consider. Materials. And then this question said, for us to produce a unit of this wood, of this desk, we need 3 kg of wood. 3 kg of wood. And then each kg of this wood costs 4 naira. 4 naira per 4 naira per kg. 4 naira per kg. Now, how much is going to be the total value of the material that we are going to purchase? How much is going to be? Can anybody tell us? Just omit and tell us. Now, how much is going to be the total cost of the materials that we need to produce 1 unit? Can anybody tell us what we are going to do here? Okay, you can go ahead. Okay. Who?
So 12 naira to produce each decks.
Okay. So it means we are going to multiply
3
that 3 kg of wood that we need by the price per kg, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, that is very fine. Now, it means for us to produce this unit of decks now, we are going to spend 12 naira in buying the materials. So the 3 kg of wood that we need now to carry out these decks, it will cost 12 naira. Now we move forward to labor. Now we'll come here, we say labor. Okay. Now, in labor aspect now, they say for us to produce each unit of this desk now, we are going to spend 4 hours. 4 hours per unit. 4 hours per unit now. And then how much are they going to pay labor for every hour they spend in processing this desk? So the question says labor is paid at the rate of 2 naira per hour. Now it means we are going to pay labor at the rate of 2 naira. 2 naira per hour. So for labor to carry out these productions, they will be paying 2 naira per hour, and we have 4 hours to produce each unit. So in a simple way, for us to get the total labor cost now per unit now, the number of hours, 4, multiply it by what you are going to pay them per unit, it's going to give you 8. It means for labor to carry out these productions of these desks per unit, we are paying them 8 naira per unit. Now, this is where we have work to do, overhead. As you can see now, the overhead now did not tell us how much we are going to spend per unit, because they are expecting us as a management accountant to be the one to absorb the overhead based on what they give us in the questions. But they have already simplified for us. Now, they said they budgeted 700,000 per annum for the overhead. 700,000 per annum. And then for the whole year, the company planned to produce 50,000 desks. 50,000 desks. So now it means for us to get the overhead per unit of these desks now is to now divide the total overhead budgeted for the productions by the total units of productions planned by the organization to produce at the end of the year. 100,000 divided by 50,000 units of desk. So now, if we calculate that 700,000 divided by the World Organization plan to produce, which is 50,000. So if you divide it now, it will give you 14 naira. Now it means for them to produce each unit of desk, now the overhead costs that they are going to spend in producing each unit of this desk is going to be 14 naira per unit of desk. I hope we are getting these narrations. Okay, someone will be okay, 14 naira. Does that mean that if you multiply 14 naira by the total unit of the desk that are going to produce, are we still going to get the same 700,000? Yes, we are going to get. If you are with your calculator, just multiply it. 14 naira multiplied by 50,000. It's still going to give you the same thing. It means the organization have already absorbed that overhead to the level of the production, to their level of production units. So I believe that we will get this explanation of this simple logic. Then we move forward. In fact, I've even put it here that okay, can go on.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask, what if there's any instance where, like now, is they give estimated overhead, but what if there's a certain overhead, is it still the same procedure?
Okay, one thing is, an organization themselves did not know the actual overhead they are going to spend per unit. The only thing they will determine is, okay, we budgeted certain amount of money, and then how are we going to split it to those level of productions? Now, in this kind of scenario now, in fact, it might come to a question where you will not see estimated. They will just tell you that the fixed cost of production is 700,000 per annum. So you, as a management accountant now, it's not left to you that, okay, this is what an organization plan to spend on this particular level of production per annum. I believe you get the explanation very well now. Are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, I believe you get the explanation now. Okay, let's proceed. Now,
yes.
All right. You know, okay. Now, this one that we just did now is only on one productions. What if an organization have more than 2 productions? How are we going to do it? How are we going to absorb this overhead to make sure that an organization was able to absorb this overhead accordingly? Now, let's move to the next. This one I said what if we have more than one product to produce in the same factory? It's not only just one product I want to produce in a factory. So in this situation now, we have to decide on a basis of assumption. Now, what we mean by basis of assumption or basis of apportionment is how an organization determined to absorb that overhead? Did they want to absorb it based on the total machine hour? No, the total machine hour, I mean the total hour that the machine they are using to produce that particular productions is going to, is going to take in produce all those productions. And then they can decide to absorb it based on the labor hour. They can decide to absorb it based on the electricity. They can decide to absorb. It depends. An organization can come up with a different approach. But as a management accountant, one thing that you just need to understand that, okay, if you see this kind of questions or any question related to what basis an organization is using to absorb this overhead, that is the first thing that should come to your mind whenever you see this kind of questions in the exam. Now, okay, now let's move to this next one that talks if an organization have more than one product, how are they going to absorb these overhead? Now, the second questions, X produce, PLC produce decks and chair. Now you can see now they are not producing only decks alone now. They are producing both decks and chair in the same factory. So, and then each deck uses 3 kg of wood, like the one we just solved, at the cost of 4 naira per kg, and then it takes 4 hours to produce each unit. Each chair uses 2 kg of wood at the cost of 4 naira per kg. This one's now, the chair now is going to use 2 kg. And then the price is also 4 naira per kg. They are still going to use the same wood. So the price is at the same value. And it takes 1 hour to produce. Now you can see now, to produce chair now, the time is lesser than the desk. In chair now, it's going to take them 1 hour to produce 1 chair. And then the labor paid at the rate of 2 naira. Now, fixed cost of production are estimated to be that same 700,000. Now, the company expects to produce 30,000 for desk and then 20,000 for chair. Now, in this aspect, now the company decided have the plan to produce 30,000 for desk and then 20,000 for chair. Now, in these questions, now they give us the basis on how the absorption cost is going to be. They say overhead is to be absorbed on the labor hour basis. So it means whenever we want to calculate our overhead now, it's need to base on the total labor hour. On the total labor hour that they used in producing the desk as well as the chair. Now, let's proceed. Let's proceed. Solution. Okay. Now, when you see this kind of questions in exam, the first thing that you need to do, okay, now that the basis of absorbing this overhead now is on labor, the question now is how many labor hours are we going to spend in producing these total productions, both the desk as well as the chair? That is the first thing that we need to calculate for. We need to determine the total labor hour in producing both the desk as well as the chair. Now, determine, okay, sorry, from me. Determine the total labor hours. Okay, let me remove this on the line. Okay, now we want to determine our total labor hour now. Remember, our total overhead still stands at 700. Okay, let me also create table to easy these two. Okay, I'm coming up. Let me create the table 2. It seems like this one is a little, maybe we will be from the next class. We'll just have and continue adopting our Excel approach. Okay, let me shift this down. Let me shift this down. Okay. All right. Now, here comes the table. Now, our total overhead still stands at 700,000. You know, it's the one now that we want to know how we are going to absorb it now. How much is going to be on the overhead per unit. So now, descriptions. Now, workings, and then total per unit. So now, like we did the other time, what are we calculating for here? We want to know the total labor hour. That is what we want to calculate for now. The total labor hour. Now, desk. You know, how many level of activity they ask us to produce in desk? They ask us to produce 30,000. They asked us to produce 30,000. And then to produce 1 unit of these decks, now they said it will take us 4 hours to produce each one. Then we want to know the total hours that we are going to spend, the total labor hour that we are going to spend in producing this 30,000 desk, 30,000 units of desks. Just multiply it by the labor hour. Then it will be 30,000 multiplied by 4 hours. So it will give us 120,000 hours. It means for us to produce this total unit of desks now that they projected to produce each unit for 4 hours, the total hour that is going to take us to produce 30,000 units now is going to be 120,000 hours before we can produce these 30,000. And then our overhead is based on these labor hours. Now we move forward to chairs. How many units do you want to produce in chairs? It's 20,000. And then how many hours is going to take us to produce each unit of this chair? Now it will take us 1 hour. This one now will be 20,000 hours. So now, since we are producing 2 products now, and the overhead of that 700,000 is the one we want to absorb based on these 2 productions. Now, what we are going to do is to add up these two total hours that we are going to take in producing those products. Now, it will be 120,000 plus 20,000. That is 140 hours. So for us to achieve this level of activities now, it will take us 140 hours to produce these 2 products. Now, we have determined the total labor hours now. And then the question say our labor, our overhead is going to absorb based on these labor hours. And then we have already determined our labor hours to be 140,000. Now we want to absorb this overhead now to know how much is going to be per unit of these products that we want to produce. Now you come here, you said overhead absorption rates. How much is the rates of this overhead absorption rate? Now, remember the formula that I make mention here, that I said the total overhead divided by the total units of whatever we are absorbing, or whatever the basis that we are absorbing the overhead on. So in this kind of questions, in this particular question now, we are absorbing our overhead on the basis of labor hour. So it will be the total. Let me just write it here. Let me write it here. Total overhead divided by the total labor hours. So that is the formula that we are using now to determine the overhead absorption rates. Now our total overhead is 700,000. 700,000. Seems like for next class we will adopt this Excel approach so that we'll be seeing the questions. Now this is our overhead 700,000 divided by the total labor hours to take us to produce these productions. Now, can someone divide this for me and tell me the answer, please, so that I will know that we are on the same page? 700,000 divided by 140 hours. So what is going to give us? Can anybody tell us? Can anybody tell us?
So I believe it's going to be 700,000 divided by 140,000.
Okay, so what are we going to get if we divide it by that? Are you with your calculator? I doubt.
5.
Okay, thank you. So 5 per hour. It means for every hours they spend in carry out the production of these each productions, they have planned to split or to attribute 5 naira of the overhead or the costs of this level of productions. So our overhead per unit, our overhead per hour, since it's based on hour now, not per unit, it's based on hour now. It means our overhead per hours, per labor hours now is 5 nairas. Now that we have determined the overhead absorption rate now, based on the labor hours. Now, the next thing to do now is to now know what is going to be the total cost per unit of producing each of these productions. That is the next thing. You know, like we did here, that we were able to get, that is the same thing now that we want to do here too. Let me try to bring another table too. Let me try to bring table. All right. So now we want to determine, you know, whenever you are, there's a name that we used to call these things. Whenever, you know, whenever we want to determine a breakdown of the costs per unit of your production, you know, we used to call it a cost card. You know, the meaning is the breakdown. You know, is the breakdown of the cost you spend in producing each of the product. You know, it's going to be the one to show you the breakdown of it. Now, description, then workings, And then, okay, this one's supposed to be 4 since it's 2 products now. Supposed to be 4. So for desk per unit, cost per unit, total costs, and costs per unit. Costs, let me just put it here, desk costs per unit. And then we come to this place too, share costs per unit. Okay, now we can proceed. Now, the number one thing, materials. We should be able to familiar how to calculate this material because we have discussed about it before. Now, the materials now said 3 kg of wood at the cost of 4 naira per unit. 3 kg at the cost of 4 naira per unit. Now you come here now, 3 kg multiplied by 4 naira per unit, 4 naira per unit. Okay. Okay. Let me add one more so that this thing can be more easy for us to do. Now, this particular work in here, this one is for desk, this one is for chair. So I don't want to mix them together so that we can understand it better. Now, we need 3 kg of wood to produce this desk, and then each kg costs 4 naira. Now, I'm not going to take more time. 3 naira multiplied by 4. We said earlier 4, 12 naira. Now, we come to this chair. Now, we go back to the questions. Chair say we need only 2 kg of wood at a cost of 4 naira per kg. Then you come here, we need 2 kg of wood, and it costs 4 naira. It costs 4 naira per kg. It costs 4 naira per kg. 4 naira per kg. Now, this one now is going to be 2 multiplied by 4. It will give us 8. It means we are going to spend 8 naira to produce. We are going to spend 8 naira to purchase the material that we need to produce this chair. Now we move forward to labor. Now we go back to the questions. The question said labor is paid at the rate of 2 naira per hours. They are paying 2 naira per hours. Now, 2 naira per hours. Okay, that is very good. Remember that the desk is going to take 4 hours, while the chairs is to take 1 hour. Then you come here, 4 hours multiplied by 2 naira, per hours. So that is 8 naira. It means we are going to spend 8 naira per labors in producing desk. Now, the chair said we need 1 hour to produce each one of these desks now. And then how much are we paying each labor per hours? We are paying them 2 naira. It means all we need to spend here to produce, all we need to spend here for each labor to produce each chair is going to be 2 naira. Now, this is where we need to pay attention. Overhead. Now, remember that the company decides to absorb their overhead based on the total labor hours. And then we determined total labor hours earlier to be 140 hours to produce both desks as well as chairs. Now, how are we going to calculate this? Remember that we have already get how much each cost per hours for the overhead absorption rate is. So now, since it's based on the total labor hours, it means whenever we want to calculate the total overhead per unit of producing each of these products now, it's going to be on the hours that labor is going to take to produce each unit of these productions, of these products. Now, labor on desk now, labor needs to spend 4 hours, and then our overhead absorption rate per unit or per unit is 5 naira based on what we calculated earlier. Now you just put the 5 naira here. Then 4 multiplied by 5 will give us 20 naira. It means to produce each unit of decks now, the overhead cost is 20 naira. The overhead cost now is 20 naira in producing the desk. Now, the chair now, they need to spend 1 hour to produce each chair. And then the overhead cost, based on what we calculated, that is being apportioned based on the total labor hours now is 5 naira. Now you come here, multiply by 5. You multiply it, give us a 5 naira. Now we have prepared our cost account by determining the cost of producing each unit of this production. Now we need to add it up now so that we are going to know how much each of the production is going to cost per unit. Now 12 for material, 8 for labor, and 20 naira for overhead. Now it means on the desk now, each unit of desk now, we need to spend 40 naira. Then we come to this place now. 8 plus 2 plus 5. So it means under chair now, we need to spend 15 naira. So in this kind of scenario now, that an organization have already know how much they are going to be spent on each of the productions or each of the unit of productions now, using an absorption method. In absorption method, like I make mention, they consider all the costs, whether direct or indirect costs. So they consider it. When we get to the marginal costing, where they only consider the direct method, we'll be discussing much better on that. But in this particular method, absorption method now, they consider all the costs, whether direct or indirect. They consider it now. So this cost card now will now help an organizations now to now know, okay, we have known that there's now want to spend 40 naira per unit. Here want to spend 15 naira. How much are we going to sell it? So that one is for another class. So what we are just determining here is just to know the cost. So once we get there, we are going to climb the ladder one after the other. Now, I believe we get this. Any question, you can unmute and ask questions before we move to the next one for tonight. So, and you can see from the notes, I decided to put, I said in practice, it will be up to the management accountant to decide on the cost approach basis they want to use. I know I've explained this earlier. So an organization or the management accountant can decide it on the basis they want to use. So it's left to them. But in exam, one thing is, at this level, they are going to tell you. So the basis they want to use, they can determine that, okay, we are not absorbing our overhead on labor hour. Maybe they want to absorb it based on machine hours. They can give you machine hour. That machine hour means the total hours that the machines is going to use. And then they will also give you labor too. So you just have to try to understand what the question asks you to do. Then it will not help you to know what or how you need to attack or attempt the questions. So now let me see if, because this is another where you need to pay more attention. So I'm thinking maybe we should just stop here tonight and then continue in the next class. So what are your suggestions? Or we should just do this last one? So what did you think? Should we continue or we should make it to the next class? So unmute now and contribute. Unmute and contribute. Unmute.
I think we should leave it for
Okay,
next
so
class.
do you all agree with her? Should we leave it to the next class? Unmute and talk. Oh, it's not by using the thumb up. Oh, unmute. Oh, you know the decision of one person cannot just. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I'll be next class.
Yes, sir. Next class.
Okay. Now before please unmute. Before we stop for tonight now. So question 2. Then I can just decided to open the to just answer the questions. Now we're able to talk about 2 different approaches. The first approach is when they have only one product, and then the second approach is when they have more than one product. Now, can someone just tell me the approach that we use in calculating this total labor hour for the 2 products? So can anyone tell me? Unmute and tell me before I will decide to pick myself.
Sir, please repeat the question again.
Okay. Now, this last question that we just did now, this last question that we just attempt, the approach that we use in the first question to determine our overhead is different from these ones now that we use. So now, can anyone just tell me on how we arrive at our total labor hour to determine our overhead assumption rates per unit? Can anyone tell me? Did you get the question very well now?
Okay, that means you want us to give a breakdown on how we solve the question?
Yes. Just tell me for the labor hour, how do we get the total labor hour? That's what I want to know. How do we get it? Now, I'm not going to show the solution. Just tell me based on the questions here. Okay, I think.
Okay.
Please, you need to be fast. My gadget to off. Just be fast. Just 30 seconds. I just need simple and direct answer, please.
Okay, so we used for the desk.
Okay.
The company expect us to produce 30 desks. So we multiply this 30 times 4 kg in order to get the labor cost for the chair, for the desk, and then we did same to get the total labor cost.
That is very fine. Okay. Now, one thing, it seems like you missed it up. Labor depend on hours. Material depend on the inventory they want to use to produce the productions. So in the question, whenever you see labor, you see hours. Labor hours. It means labor hours. Whenever you see materials, it's been depend on the material they want to use to produce their productions. So in these questions now, the only thing that I expect you to say is, okay, they say our overhead should be absorbed. The thing is even here. I just want someone to just say it. That, okay, our overhead should be absorbed based on labor hour rate.
Okay.
And then each labor hour rate, each labor hours, it means, okay, for us to produce each unit of a deck, we need to spend 4 hours. and then our labor is based on the total hour that we are going to spend in producing each unit. So for us now to now determine the total labor hours now, is for you to just multiply, okay, the total unit that the company have already projected to produce, multiplied by the hours you plan to produce each one.
Okay.
So you get the explanation very well now.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to share one exercise in the class, and I want us to submit it before the next class. So this is where we will be ending the class for tonight. Any questions before we go? Any questions? Any question before we go? And then as from next class, before we start any team, 2 or 3 people will be tested in our previous class. So which means we need to make sure that any exercise or any explanation that we give in class, make sure that you're able to go through it after the class and you study it on your own, because I can decide to call anybody. That is why we are here, just to learn and make sure that whatever we are teaching, we're able to get it and then understand it, so that in the exam, whenever we see such, it will be very, very easy for us to attempt. And then in the group, you people are not really engaging, because I want you ask questions whenever you are having issues related to any topic, so that we will know the way we can deal with it. And I share a pivot questions, just like a guide on how the ICANN is going to set their exam. So I want us to just go through it, just for you to know how the structure is going to be. So we might decide to use one of 2 questions there, so that we explain it more better for any of us that did not understand. So this is where we'll be stopped. Thank you very much for tonight, and then good night, and have a lovely rest. So good night, everyone. Good night. Take care. Bye bye. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.